Here we are along the ridge immediately north of North Utoy Creek. This particular ridge is the destination for the U.S. 14th Army Corps under the command of Major General John M. Palmer and the U.S. 23rd Army Corps. Now as we look, I'm facing south. There are trenches here that are facing southwest. The Confederate Army is immediately over Utoy Creek in the extended line of defenses south of the creek, and Herring Mill is in the direction that I'm pointing at. The U.S. 23rd Corps proceeded down here along the Willis Mill Road, which is directly in our front. We're in the Lionel Hampton Nature Preserve, and this is one of the best examples of entrenchments that still remain in Atlanta. These trenches were occupied for about a week, and they were the jumping off point for the operation that we now know as the Battle of Utoy Creek, or the Operation at Utoy Creek. And the purpose of this operation was to cut the railroads southwest of here, and because Sherman did not believe that Hood's men had enough men to hold all these works and line of works that were here. Now, what else was also here was a signal station for the United States Army Signal Corps for the Army of the Ohio. They were placed on the high ground here, and they could actually connect in the top of the tree 5 miles north of here. They could, from Davis Hill, Sherman's Signal Corps detachment was able to send signals from the top of trees to one another, because these 2 points are very high ground. So here we sit in the historic position used for the jumping off point for the operation at Utoy Creek. Now what happened here? The Federal Army came here, and you see these very significant entrenchments. In fact, they're 2 lines deep. Why are they 2 lines deep? Because each time the Federal Army moved in Atlanta toward the Confederate communications, General Hood attacked the Union Army. So Schofield expected to be attacked here. Now Hood, it's always talked about that Schofield knew Hood's personality, and that Hood was brash, and that Hood was very aggressive, and he would make a bold attack. That's what Schofield said. Well, the tables are reversed here, because Hood knew Schofield to be very timid. And so Hood actually placed his troops, the only troops he had available to back up Stephen D. Lee, who had lost 6,000 killed and approximately 10,000 in total that wounded and killed, out of his corps of 16,000 men. He lost over a third of his corps. He was short of men to really cover this area. So Armstrong's Mississippi Cavalry belonged to Jackson's brigade of Wheeler's cavalry, was actually placed south of Utoy Creek, and they were used as dragoons. They were used as mounted infantry. The Confederate cavalry carried a rifle and a bayonet, and they could fight as infantry. And here they actually did that. They entrenched south of Utoy Creek, and they had artillery to further thwart the Union idea that they were going to be attacked again. And they shelled the heck out of this hill right here. So Schofield was timid. Palmer, they expected to be attacked here, just as the Army of the Tennessee had been attacked at Ezra Church. But these folks here were not equipped the same way that the Army of the Tennessee was, with their new 13-shot Henry rifles. So it might have been more of a fair fight if Hood had chosen to directly assault here, but he did not.
Now, can you talk a little bit about the difference between Palmer and Schofield and how that was coordinated up here?
Now, the order written on the 30th of July 1864 directed that Schofield would move with his corps, the Army of the Ohio. The Army of the Ohio was 1 corps, 2 divisions. And Schofield was not only an Army commander commanding a department of the Ohio, but he also commanded this corps. Now, Schofield was actually at this time not here. Schofield was up at the I think it's A.J. Smith's house that was on Martin Luther King, about where the McDonald's is. So Schofield is quite comfortable as an Army commander up at this headquarters in this private home, having tea and coffee, nice and comfortable, while his soldiers are down here preparing to be assaulted. Schofield was a great administrator, but not the greatest of leading troops in the field. He left that to his subordinates. Now, General John M. Palmer, on the other hand, commanded the 14th Army Corps, the largest corps in the Union Army. They also had the uniqueness of having the only regular Army units in their organization. King's Brigade of regular Army troops was assigned to the 14th Army Corps, and they were no joke. They were very dependable soldiers. And the 14th Corps was moved here first from Davis's Hill. They prepared these defenses, probably the front line of defenses, and then the second line of defenses was prepared by the 23rd Corps, who was right behind them. Again, expecting to be attacked by Hood, but that did not happen. And this is where Schofield becomes in charge of the operation, and he begins sending orders directly to Palmer's subordinate division commanders. This causes a ruckus because the division commanders of the 14th Corps belong to the Army of the Cumberland, and Schofield is from the Army of the Ohio, a separate army. Now Palmer went to his commander, General Thomas, and said, "General Thomas, my division commanders are receiving orders directly from Schofield. Do you expect us to accept, are we expected to accept orders from Schofield and the Army of the Ohio?" And Thomas says, "Certainly not. You're expected to cooperate with Schofield." So basically, Palmer told his division commanders to ignore the orders from Schofield. This became a big controversy. And in fact, Palmer, who is 52 years old and an attorney, and who is a volunteer soldier, who had rose to the ranks to command a corps as a major general, was a significant and well-respected, gallant soldier. He had fought at Chickamauga when the 14th Corps saved the Union Army under Rosecrans. And he was no joke. He was very dependable, and his corps could always be entrusted to move quickly. So Palmer complained to Sherman. He said, "General Sherman, your order directs that I'm to obey the orders of General Schofield." He said, "Sir, I cannot, with my own self-respect, do this because Schofield is my junior." Palmer had been promoted to general when Schofield was still a colonel, and he considered himself to be superior in rank, with date of rank as a brigadier and also as a major general. But what Palmer did not know is that when Schofield became a department commander, they later corrected Schofield's date of rank to match that of Palmer's, so they were equal. And because Schofield was a department and an army commander, Sherman considered him to be superior. However, this was a great controversy in rank, and it caused a delay. If the two corps had moved quickly and swiftly, the only force between them and East Point would have been the Mississippi Cavalry and part of S.D. Lee's corps, which is immediately to our southwest. And if they had maneuvered around them, they might have been able to have gotten to the railroad. But this delay in rank, this timidity because they feared that Hood was going to attack them, caused a delay. Sherman later said to Schofield, "General Schofield, your delay in your movements against the railroads I consider to be equal to the loss of 2,000 men." Well, a few days later, in the 3 attacks at Utoy Creek on the 3rd, on the 5th, and on the 6th, that number is going to jump out at us because Sherman loses about that many men in that period of time.
Okay. Did you want to talk about Palmer resigning, or is that a little bit later on?
That's a little bit later.
Okay. Now, Perry, can you talk a little bit about what's going on across the valley here?
Sure.
Go ahead.
All right. Now, as this order is written by Sherman, not only does the 14th Corps and the 23rd Corps move to this position, the U.S. 15th Army Corps moves to the southern part of what is now Westview Cemetery, also on the north bank of Utoy Creek. And the 14th Corps connects with them about half a mile over here. So you have Johnson's division that's over here in the woods. You have Davis's division, which is right here. Again, Davis, we just mentioned about Davis Hill. Now, where's General Davis? General Davis is suffering from dysentery, diarrhea. He's sick in his tent back at Davis's Hill, where we were just previously from here. So he was not involved at the Utoy Creek operation. And in fact, General King takes over his some of his duties in the operation.
Okay, and then last thing before we move on to the next place is, can you talk a little bit about how these trenches were structured, i.e., the fact that they zigzag?
As you notice, as we look down here, you see the trenches are sort of straight here, but they zigzag right and left. The reason for this, and there's also a mound of dirt that's placed between them, okay? And these traverses are designed to block in case a battery gets your position in sight and they begin firing, and the cannonballs or the shells come down the trench line, so it won't kill everyone in a straight line. So they sort of curve for purpose. You'll notice this one curves back this way and then goes forward. That's purposefully done because they saw earlier in the war that a good artillery battery commander would be able to fire down the trench lines, and then the trenches that they dig offer no protection from above, from the steel rain that would come down from the exploding artillery shells.
And one more thing, why were there trenches here? If the Federal Army was moving on the railroad, why would they stop and entrench here?
It became their SOP, their standard operating procedure. Every time the Federal Army or the Confederate Army moved and were here for any period of time, again, they were expecting to be attacked. They were told this. So look at these trenches. They were only here for a couple of days, but they're expecting to be attacked. So their men are working furiously. And of course, the men here in the Army of the Ohio have not been attacked. They've heard about the Army of the Tennessee being attacked in Atlanta. They've heard about the Army of the Tennessee being attacked at Ezra Church. They've heard about the Army of the Cumberland being attacked at Peachtree Creek. But they have not yet been attacked yet. So they're nervous. The guys are digging these deep trenches to protect themselves. And they picked an excellent hill overlooking North Utoy Creek. There's also a battery emplacement to the north where they place their guns. Now here's something unique about the Federal Army. The Federal Army always kept all 4 of their guns together, a complete battery together. The Confederate Army did something different. Their SOP was they would disperse their guns into 2-gun sections, and they would spread them along the line for defensive purposes that would allow for an improved defense. It was just a different in the 2 armies and their tactics that worked. Here we are in the Lionel Hampton Park in the extensive trench line prepared by the U.S. 14th Army Corps on or about 1 and 2 August 1864. Look at these trenches. They're as significant as anything you find at Kennesaw Mountain. We have a front trench, we have the main trench, and we have the rear trench. Why are there 2 lines of trenches here? Because they expected to be attacked. Now here I am facing north, looking toward Davis's Hill, which is 5 miles north of here where Sherman issued his order for this corps to come here. The 23rd Corps came behind the 14th Corps because they were going to pass through lines and make an attack to our south. Now looking to our south is North Utoy Creek at the bottom of this hill, and on the next ridge over here is Armstrong's dismounted cavalry, and in this direction is Beecher Circle. We're looking directly at Beecher Circle. Now, on or about the 3rd of August 1864, Gleason's brigade was sent to cross the creek, as well as the Haskell's division and Johnson's 1st Division of the 14th Army Corps. Sort of very unusual. Schofield's plan for making this movement calls for 1 division from the 14th Corps to move, and then a unit from the 23rd Corps to move. Now these units typically don't work together. That's a bit strange in tactics. Normally what happens is you will have 1 unit have a sector that they control. So the 14th Corps would normally have been given an area and say attack on this route, and the 23rd Corps would be given another operational area. But Schofield tries to mix the divisions up, and they don't normally work together. So it does not cause for things to go smoothly as they should. The bridge immediately to our west is Peyton Road, which is also the Bankston House to our west. The Confederate cavalry is operating at the Bankston House, but as the Federals approach this ridge here, they leave from the Bankston House and move to the south part of Utoy Creek. They burn the bridge at Bankston's. Later, the U.S. Regular Army Brigade does a forced crossing when on the 2nd day of operations, Johnson's division is moved from here and moved around the flank to cross North Utoy farther to the west. But look at these entrenchments. They're significant. And why are they significant? Again, General Palmer and General Schofield are expecting to be attacked. Every time the Federals move against the defensive lines of the Confederates or against their line of supply on the railroads, they're attacked by Hood. What they don't know is that Hood has been ordered by Jefferson Davis not to attack the Federals in their entrenchments whenever possible. Now there was also artillery. If you see the curve right here, this is very unique here. This is an example of where a trench crosses a road. And the road is here, and the mounds come up to either side of the road. And it's just a small road for our standards today, but it's large enough for an army wagon and for a horse to traverse through. So, and the artillery was brought up on this hill. So they had artillery here that's facing the Confederate artillery to the south. Now, why do they think Hood is going to attack him? Because the Mississippi cavalry, Confederate cavalry south of Armstrong, has an artillery battery, and they are shelling the heck out of this hill. What do the Confederates do before they attack? They usually initiate an artillery barrage. So this led to the insecurities of Schofield, assuming he's going to be attacked. Hood played into Schofield's insecurities here and had the line shelled by the artillery of Armstrong's cavalry.
How does this site fit into the entire Battle of Utoy Creek and taking the East Point Railroad, this larger site here?
This is a jumping off point. It's along a major thoroughfare, the Willis Mill Road, that travels south all the way to Campbellton. If they can travel this route all the way and cross the Sandtown Road and get to Campbellton, they can get into East Point very easily. That's the objective. That's why Willis Mill Road is so important.